Do you have multiple kids that you are homeschooling and you are trying to figure out how do I do this efficiently without completely losing my sanity or dropping all of these plates that I'm trying to spin? Well, then today's video is for you because I'm going to be sharing 10 tips that will help you when it comes to homeschooling different ages of kids and multiple kids at one time. So let's get started. I have 6 kids that I personally homeschool, so I very much understand the need to juggle things. We also have an interesting dynamic in our home in the sense that several of my kids are close in age. The first 4 only have a year between each of them, but then we have a large gap before we have our last 2. This means that I have had those years where I've had multiple students and only had younger kids, and then other times where I've had a mixture of older and younger. And today I'm going to share that over 10 years of experience that I have in these 10 tips for you. The first tip I almost didn't share because it is so widely shared, but it's still an important one, and that is to combine subjects or combine effort as much as humanly possible. You can easily do this when it comes to things like science, history, Bible, and even some extracurriculars. There are lots of different curriculums out there that do that, and you guys can check out my channel to find more information about things like Biblioplan, Story of the World, Apology of Science, and more that you can utilize with the entire family. But also there are curriculums that are designed specifically for families to do all together. So there are things like Gather Round that involves all the different subjects, or at least most of the different subjects that you can do in a family style. If you want to learn more about family style curriculums, be sure to check out my friend Abby over at Family Style Learning. Her entire channel is dedicated to this type of schooling, and you can learn more about tips and tricks and curriculum to use over there. But combining curriculum isn't the only way that you can combine your efforts. You can look into things like co-ops. While you're not combining all the kids in one curriculum or one topic at a time, you are combining learning happening without you having to be the person teaching every single person all at one time. So for us, we do co-ops on Fridays. Each of my kids get to study the thing that is of interest to them or works for their particular age group, and yet I'm only teaching one class. This is a great way to multiply your efforts, which we'll talk more about here in a second. The second tip is to utilize rotations. This is really important. You don't have to teach every single subject every single day. You can rotate through the subjects. So teach science on one day, history on the other, and then just rotate those through. We can also rotate through with our specific children. Now, I know that as parents, a lot of times we feel the need to micromanage everything, and we would love to be able to sit one-on-one with each of our children and teach them each and every subject, but that's not really realistic. So I recommend picking 1 to 2 subjects max for each of your children that you feel like they could really use uninterrupted, focused teaching time. For my kids, that was learning how to read, because that's sort of the basis and foundation of what they're going to need for all of the different subjects. Doesn't mean I don't help them or teach them in other areas, but it just means those are times that I'm going to block off a very specific window to work with just that child one-on-one. I'm going to rotate through that and utilize things like visual timers to help the other kids know when I'm available versus when I'm working one-on-one with a kid. You can see more information about that in videos I've done previously, and I'll leave a link down to all of that below. And don't forget, when it comes to rotating through, that you can utilize different times of day. So if you have those little ones who are early morning risers and you have older kids that are harder to get out of bed, utilize those natural rhythms and routines in your home and do your rotation with your littlest kids first thing in the morning before school even officially starts. You can use the same method with teens who are up late and utilize evening hours for some of their rotations if you need to. Or of course, if you have ones who are napping, you can utilize nap time to work with older children as well. Tip 3 is to plan buffer time in your day. It is critical that you do not pack your homeschool day and or curriculum with so much work that it could not hardly get done even on a perfect day, let alone a real life day. A life day where the dog runs through the house and tramples mud everywhere. A day when the toddler gets covered in flour because they got into the pantry. A day when a child is melting down over math. We need to build buffer into our homeschool days so that we are able to have the physical and mental energy that is needed to tend to each of our children and have a realistic schedule that's not going to overwhelm them. If you don't know how to plan buffer time in your homeschool day because you don't know how much time things actually take, that's one of the first steps I would recommend, is take your day and time each subject without your children knowing. That's really important because otherwise they're going to feel a lot of pressure and either underperform or overperform from what they would normally. If you wanted to get all fancy, you could record how long it takes them to do math for 5 days in a row and average it out. But the fact is, we're busy moms and we've got multiple kids, so ain't nobody got time for that. So instead, what I would recommend is just taking 1, maybe 2 days, timing yourself, seeing how much time your child takes for each subject. The number might actually surprise you. You might feel like it's taking an hour and a half, but it really only takes 40 minutes. Or other things might feel like they take a short amount of time and are actually taking much longer. So time those things, write it down, and then put in a little bit of buffer on either side so that you have plenty of room for those days when extra review or help is needed, or again, when those life circumstances happen. Number 4 is to use podcasts and audiobooks. This is a great option regardless of your children's age to sneak in a little extra learning and to allow you to be able to work with other kids. So regardless of whether your child is able to do a whole lot independently, even the youngest learners can enjoy a fun podcast or audiobook and getting some engagement and learning in without kind of having to have a lot of extra technology time or a lot of oversight. If you want to learn more about some of my favorite podcasts for kids, be sure to check out the video down below. Tip number 5 is a must, and that is to prepare activities, anything you can ahead of time. It's going to save you lots of headaches, and it's going to ensure you have some consistency in your home. You can do this by choosing curriculums that are already open and go, that don't need a lot of prep. But even the curriculums that don't need a lot of prep can oftentimes be helped by just looking over those lessons just for a few minutes at the beginning of the week. Kind of having an idea of where you're heading will help you be mentally prepared so that you can enter into each of those lessons with confidence. For maybe those curriculums that are not as open and go, preparing those things before you even start the school year, like with All About Reading, I prepare my entire binder of all the pages ahead of time so I'm not cutting out things the day of. Or for things like my history co-op, where we do a lot of hands-on activities, I will prepare those at least a week in advance so that I have time to go buy the supplies and gather them. You can set these things out the night before, you can do it a week ahead, you can do it a semester ahead, whatever fits you and your lifestyle best, but planning ahead and thinking through these things before you get there, it's gonna help you a lot. Number 6 is to have clear expectations for your kids. And personally, I recommend utilizing checklists when it comes to these expectations and communicating those well so you can set your kids up for success. Whether that means you have a planner for your child, whether that means you use visual reminders like a visual checklist or a visual schedule of what is coming next, whether it means writing it out, utilizing pictures, or having a combination of both, it's really helpful for your kids to know exactly what's expected of them, and it helps ensure things don't fall through the cracks. Because I oftentimes will run through the mental checklist in my brain of, okay, we got to this and this and this, and then all of a sudden realize we forgot to do spelling for a week because it wasn't written down anywhere. It also helps your kids as they're building independence, and even as they get older, I will give my kids just a checklist of what they need to get done for the week, and then I allow them to break that up and to schedule that however they may prefer. Number 7 is to practice brain breaks. Having lots of opportunity for breaks in your homeschool, but structured breaks. Because if you give just open-ended free time breaks, and that works for you, that is fantastic. Don't change a thing. But for me, it ends up being like herding cats. They all scatter to the winds, they get engrossed in a project that they are hyper-fixating on, and then I have a lot of trouble bringing them back in. So instead, we put breaks into our homeschool days that are very structured and that offer movement opportunities. So this looks like at the beginning of our day, before we even jump into school, my kids do a workout together as they're using the form curriculum. This has been fantastic for them because they get their bodies and their minds moving and ready to go before we even start learning. But we also do brain breaks throughout the day. If our children are struggling with a particular concept or they're just really overwhelmed or frustrated, oftentimes we'll have a dance break and listen to their favorite song. And then once that song's over, we go back to school. Or maybe it's that you utilize fun YouTube videos or different physical movements or things like that to just give them sort of that break and to get their bodies moving before heading back into their schoolwork. We also do this at the end of our school day, as all of my kids have quiet time. From teens down to tots, they've always had 1 hour of quiet time in our home where everyone lays down for the day. And I don't care what they do during that time. They can do something creative, they can read, they can sleep, but this is a time for them to just chill and relax and helps them really be more focused and reset attitudes before going into the rest of our day. Number 8, have siblings help siblings. I used to hate this advice as a mom of 4 kids who were only a year apart. Having the 4-year-old help the 1-year-old wasn't particularly helpful advice. But I do want to encourage you, it can be good with some caveats. If you have children that have a little bit wider age ranges than that, you can definitely have younger kids read their word lists or their books to older kids. You can have kids help practice flashcards with one another or play a review game. It can be a great way to sneak in a little extra review for an older child that maybe could use it but would feel insulted by revisiting that material in that way. But it also is something that it can do even peer-to-peer. My 7-year-old and my 6-year-old will oftentimes help quiz each other on their flashcards or on different concepts. And so there can be that as well. I wouldn't leave them completely alone to do this or do this on a regular basis, but it is a fun way for building in more review and helping mom be less needed. Now, one of the caveats I do have to give to this is be aware that our children can definitely help each other out. It's part of being a family. It's a wonderful aspect, but don't overload your older children who already have a much heavier workload with having to take on tons and tons of responsibility with younger siblings. I like to find that balance between helping them be involved, creating connection points for them, but also making sure I'm taking into account the other things they have going on in that week or that day. No matter what your dynamic is within your home, make sure if you do have an older child working with a younger child, you give some structure to that. Don't just tell them, hey, you're going to work with your sibling during this time on some stuff, right? That's too broad and oftentimes will end up in fights or a big power struggle. Instead, give them things like, hey, I want you to share with the little one, with the toddler, where guys are going to go over the ABCs and the colors. And we're gonna just go through these flashcards and then you're done. Whatever it is, just help give some structure and guidance. And obviously, certain kids probably are not gonna work well with certain other kids in a large family dynamic. Just accept that reality and know we can work on that relationship later when there's a little more parental supervision. Number 9 is multiplying your efforts as a mom with utilizing technology. Now, I know for some people this is taboo, and again, each person should homeschool the way that suits their family and your convictions. But technology can be very helpful when used sparingly and intentionally. In our home, we loved to save technology time when my kids, my little ones, would go watch a leapfrog video or a magic school bus video during the time when I needed to have that rotation with an older child that needed my focused attention. You can also do this by utilizing free apps, educational resources online, or even different educational YouTube videos with your kids. Of course, with parental discretion, but this is a great way to multiply your efforts to get in some review and learning while also working with an older child. But you can also create your own material as a parent. You can record yourself going through flashcards for your kids or reading a book to them. You can have grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings who record themselves doing, talking about the alphabet or going over a Bible verse or reading a story or any of these things for your child to rewatch later, to practice and to review, and to get that connection maybe with people they don't get to see that often. Number 10 is being aware of the comparison game. When you have multiple ages and you have multiple kids, there are going to be times where you have splintered skills, where you have a child who is excelling in a subject and maybe passing an older sibling or a couple of older siblings. You're going to have natural competition that builds between your kids, and you do want to encourage them to focus on their own work. But one of the ways that we have done this is when a younger child significantly passes an older child, we oftentimes like to keep them in separate curriculums. If you want to learn more tips about how to help with this comparison game and cut down on those kinds of issues while also addressing the hard issue, be sure to check out this video here.